Amy from Play to Learn Preschool. I hope you had a great weekend, and if you're a mom or you spent the day with your mom, I hope you had a wonderful Mother's Day. I am joining you this afternoon with what I think is the most difficult part about being a preschool teacher. I compare it to when I was a second grade teacher in the public schools. We would have students, who are 7 or 8 years old, who we had concerns about. If it was that their reading was a below grade level, or we had some other kind of developmental concerns about their motor skills or something else like that. And we would, have conferences with the parents, and by age 7 or 8, the parents had heard it a few times before. So when I would recommend in second grade, I think we maybe should have your child, tested or have the child looked at by our diagnostics team. Most of the time the parents are like, yeah, we've heard it. We've heard it in kindergarten, we heard it in first grade, we're hearing it again, we see it too. But the difficult thing about being a preschool teacher, and I still say after 12 years, this is the most difficult thing about being a preschool teacher, is a lot of times we are the first people that have spent any measurable amount of time with a child other than the family or the parents. And so a lot of times that means that we might be the first ones to notice that maybe there's a little bit something off, or a little something that concerns us in terms of their development. And although the child has been going to well checks at age 1 and 2 with the pediatrician, sometimes, and I know pediatricians are so busy and so good, but sometimes in 15 minutes, it's impossible for the pediatrician to note some of the things that we note when we spend 3, 4, 5, 6, 8 hours a day with the children. And so I think the most difficult thing about being a preschool teacher is when we have concerns about a child's development. I think that is the most difficult thing, because a lot of times we're the first people, maybe not to notice it, because a lot of times I feel that the parents have noticed it but don't know what to do with that information, but we're the first ones to say to the parents, I have a concern. And so what it is, Colleen, I'm glad to hear you agree, because it just almost makes me sick to my stomach every time. And it happens because they're 3 years old, and it's going to happen. And a lot of times it's nothing, or it's something small, like a little language delay or something, not small, but very easily remedied with some early interventions. And sometimes it's something a little bit more significant. And a lot of times we are the first ones to notice it, and the first ones that have the opportunity to say to the parents, I've noticed that, blah, blah, blah. And so what I'd like to do today is kind of share with you the steps that I go through when I have concerns about a child's development. First, I want to say that it's really important that we give it some time, and that we build two things. We build a positive rapport with the family. So from day one, we're sending home happy grams, we're giving the child lots of positive reinforcement, because let's face it, sometimes kids are just shy, or they've never spent a day or 3 hours outside of their home, right? Other than at the playground or grandma's house. They've never been in a setting like the one that we're providing them. And so for a lot of kids, that first week of school, you might think that you have developmental concerns, but really the problem is just that the child has not had any experience with it. And so the very first thing is just to build a lot of positive rapport and put a lot of strategies in place. If it's visual cues, modeling the behaviors that we want from our students so that they can be successful, because we cannot take anything for granted, like they know how to carry a pencil across the room, because they probably don't, or they know how to wash their hands because maybe they've never seen a sink with a faucet exactly like the one you have in your classroom. So we're going to give them some time, and during that time we are building this positive rapport with our parents, giving lots of positive encouragement, lots of strategies, and lots of support for all of our children to be successful at the beginning of the school year. And then after a certain amount of time, for me, it's usually in October or November, after I've had them for 2 or 3 months, that of course, right from the get-go, you might notice, right? But I might start to say, okay, I have concerns about such a child. The concerns might be the child's language, that maybe they are not speaking as much or as clearly as their same age peers. It might be the child's behavior, might be their hearing. There might be any number of concerns that you have about a child. And so what I'd like to just kind of chat with you about is that process that I go through in my own mind when I start to have concerns about a child through sharing those concerns with the parent, because that is the hardest thing about being a preschool teacher. And as a mom on the receiving end of it, I know from experience that it is the hardest thing about being a parent. And so you're with the teacher and the parent, and they're both in this really hard situation, but it's a very necessary situation because our job, of course, is to make sure that our children get everything they need. And if that means that they need interventions, if it's language intervention or some kind of a special intervention from a specialist, it's sometimes our job to be the one to put that ball into motion, or that, to get that kind of get it started. So here are some of the steps that I go through when I start to have concerns about a child. Number one, the most important thing you can do is to take very objective notes about what you observe with the child. An objective note has no emotion in it, which is tough because sometimes these kids that we have concerns about, maybe frustrate us, or we're feeling exhausted by them. But it's really important that when we're writing down our observations about what's happening, that there are no emotions in that observation. The observation has to be who the child is, what happened, what was going on when it happened. So little Johnny was playing near the sensory table. The other kids were pouring rice and scooping it and putting it through the funnel. Little Johnny was spinning the wheels on the bottom of the sensory table. This behavior lasted for 20 minutes. Teacher A and Teacher B tried to redirect Johnny into the sensory table. Johnny did not pay attention. He did not acknowledge them when they said his name. He did not engage in play with the other kids. Objective, right? Who it was, what was happening, who interacted, how long did it last, exactly, objective notes. And I like to keep these mostly on sticky notes, Post-it notes, because I just have them in my pocket, and I'll just jot it down because my memory is terrible. It'll happen at like 9 o'clock, and then the kids leave at noon, and I'm like, something happened this morning. I was gonna write it down. I didn't. And so I just jot it down very quickly in my pocket. And then we stick all those sticky notes into a notebook. And we just have a page for each kid. You could put it in their portfolio or however you keep your notes. But they have to be very objective. I don't only make objective observations of kids who are having problems. I also make objective observations about, oh, so-and-so decided to work at the writing center. I noticed that she used her left hand every time she colored. Note, so-and-so used her left hand when she colored at the writing center, and the date. But it's really important that we have compiled this set of observations because these are going to come in handy later. And then with all of my parents, we have this fall conference. You could do the conference anytime, but I want to specifically talk about the 4 things that I do with the parents of a child that I have concerns about. So when we've scheduled this conference and I have my binder or my notebook full of these observations that do not say, I was so frustrated with Johnny, he wouldn't listen, he wouldn't come play with all the other kids. It's just very objective, right? So I just write down what I've seen. And then when it's time for me to have the conference, these are the 4 things that I like to do with the parents. The first is, and this is for every kid, is I always start off with something positive. We really enjoy having Susie in class. She always has a huge smile on her face. She's affectionate and friendly, and the other kids enjoy playing with her. Start with something positive. Don't sugarcoat anything because the parents will read right through that, right? They'll read right through your baloney. But definitely start with something that's genuinely positive, that the child is doing well. You might have to get a tiny bit creative, but I promise you that if you really think about it, I need something that's genuinely positive about this child. You will be able to come up with something, because I've never met a child that I was not able to come up with positive, attributes to start off with. So I always start with something positive. And then I will engage the parents in a question. Do you have any questions or concerns about your child's development? Sometimes they lead with, yeah, I noticed he doesn't really talk as much as all the other 3-year-olds. And then you can go in with that. And sometimes they'll say, nope, I don't have any questions or concerns. And that's the tricky part then, when we have to be able to say, okay, but I have seen these things that I want to share with you in class. The second thing, so the first thing is always start with something positive. Ask that question. What are you seeing at home? Do you have any concerns or questions? And then the second thing that I always try to remember to do because I get nervous about these conferences. But the second thing is I always try to say something that is very reassuring to the parents. If it's, you're doing a really great job as their mom, like he is very well loved. I can tell you love your child so much, that he's so well cared for. He's such a lucky little guy. Or I really enjoy being in class with your child. You know, she's affectionate. I love when she sits on my lap and we read books. Whatever it is, there needs to be some reassurance before we go in with the concerns, especially if the parents say, I have no concerns and no questions. So start with something positive, ask the question, you know, do you have any questions or concerns? And then always offer some reassurance. I know as a mom, that's really important to hear, because if the teacher starts in with, in my example, I have concerns about your son, and just there they all are. It's like, you know, but I read to him every night, and you know, I do such a good job with him. The parents need to hear from you, the teacher, the expert, that you are doing a good job with your child. Your child is in good hands. Your child is lucky to have you for the parents. And then I might say, this is what I'm seeing in class. Most of the class is playing together doing X, Y, and Z, and your child is doing X, Y, Z. Or most of my 3-year-olds are able to answer a question like, what was your favorite center today? Your child has not yet been able to answer that question in class during circle time. Whatever the observation is, I want to just give it as a very objective observation. This is what I see in class. Most of the kids the same age as your child can do blah, 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 or are doing blah, blah, blah. And your child is doing blah, blah, blah. Opposite, or not quite there yet. It's really, really, really important that we as teachers, unless you have a degree in educational diagnostics or psychology or something, I don't, my degree is in reading, do not make any type of a guess or a diagnosis. I think your child has a speech delay. I think your child has autism. I think your child has, you know, developmental delay. Nothing like that. Just, this is what I'm seeing compared to what most children your child's age are doing. And then when we've said those concerns, you know, there'll be some back and forth, some questions. Well, you know, he does it at home, and, you know, say, okay, well, maybe it's still, you know, shyness, or still getting used to the, still getting used to the situation. But I'll say, hold your, because your instincts are usually good, right? As a teacher, and I always try to say to parents who do, and they'll get defensive, is, I want what's best for your child. I am not having this conference because I want to make your life miserable, right? Like, I am here only because I want what's best for your child. And if there's something else that we can be doing to help your child meet these goals or to do better, that's what I want for your child. And so it's important if we say, you know, that same reassurance, like, I want what's best for your child the same as you do. And so after we've stated these concerns, you know, the parent might say, well, what are we going to do about it? And it's really important, like I said, that we do not make any type of a diagnosis or a guess, because we have no business doing that. We're not licensed or trained in any way to do that. And so I'll just say, I think you should make an appointment to talk with your child's pediatrician about these concerns. Or if your county or your town or whatever has some type of a child find early intervention office through the public schools, that might be another good place to give them a referral. But you need to have a next step for them. So we've given the positive notes, offered some reassurances, stated our concerns, and then the next thing is to give them the next step, because they're gonna be like, all right, well, what are we gonna do about it? I'm doing the best I can do. You're doing the best you can do. What are we gonna do to solve this problem? And so the basic thing is to say, you should talk with your child's pediatrician soon. Make an appointment. If their birthday is not until November, and here it is May, go ahead and make the appointment now with the concern. You know, my child's teacher had a concern about this, or saw this thing in class, and I want to talk with you about it, because the pediatricians are there for that too. So if you don't have some kind of a child find or early intervention office or program in your area, always recommend that the child go to the pediatrician, or that the parent make an appointment with the pediatrician to talk about the concerns or about your observations that you've seen in the class. And that's it. That's really all we can do as preschool teachers. I always follow up with an email to the parent that afternoon, like, Thank you again so much for meeting with me. As I mentioned, I love being so-and-so's teacher. He has so much creativity and such a vivid imagination. I really enjoy when we build, towers together in the block area. His giggle's infectious. As I mentioned, these are some of the things that I'm seeing in class, and I might just bullet 2 or 3 of them out, because sometimes what happens in the conference is the parent's brain starts going like, the teacher says there's a problem, or the teacher has a concern. I'm trying to listen, but I can't take it all in. So we always follow up with an email. And I just taught maybe 2 or 3. I wouldn't list them all out, right? Not everything from the binder, not everything from the notebook, but just 2 or 3 of the concerns, so that they have something kind of in hand to take to the pediatrician. And then I always say, please let me know the outcome of your appointment with the pediatrician. Now, there's nothing more you can do. If the parents decide, I'm not taking the child to the pediatrician, I disagree with you, I don't think that there's a concern, there is nothing that we can do other than the next time there's a conference, say, these are the things I'm seeing. You're doing a really great job as a parent. I think that if your child was able to, have some extra, if there was something more I could do, I want to make sure that there's nothing I'm missing so that we can help him achieve and be the very best he can be. That's always a good way to say it too. Like, let's just rule out any problems. So I want you to take your child to the pediatrician to rule out hearing problems or motor, let's just take him there to rule some things out. Somebody asked, what do I do if the parent is not receptive? And that happens. And the best we can do is to just continue on with our, what we're doing in class. And like I said, at the next opportunity, just say it again. And sometimes it takes 2, 3, 4, 5 times of the parent hearing it. And before the parent starts to notice those similar things at home, when they say, maybe, we should talk to the pediatrician about what the teacher's seeing, or maybe we are seeing it at home, but we didn't recognize it because he's our only child, or, she's, the oldest child, and the baby, we don't have anything to compare him to. We don't have a lot of other experience with other kids that age. So the truth is that even when the child is in the process of maybe, being diagnosed or screened by the pediatrician or by your early intervention offices, you're going to have that child in your classroom the whole year pretty much, because that thing takes forever. And even then, maybe they'll find, their child needs speech, and the child is going to go to speech and still be in your classroom. And so I think we need to go into it with the mindset of, what are we going to do to make the best of this year with this child? How can I best meet this child's needs for this school year? And I think you always have to have that mindset of, we're in this for the long haul together, the parents, the teacher, the child. What can we do that's best to help this child meet the objectives and to do the best they can do at school? And so I really do think that's the hardest part. My heart breaks because, like I said, as a mom, I've been on the receiving end, and it is heartbreaking to hear somebody say that they have a concern about your child. And so I think it's really important that we put ourselves in those parents' shoes and do everything we can, again, not to sugarcoat it, but to reassure them, this is going to be okay. Your child's doing great. And if he or she does need some interventions, they're so successful with 3-year-olds, right? Better get him in speech language at age 3 and have him make a ton of progress and catch up to his same age peers than wait until he's 7 and then hear it in the 2nd grade classroom like, oh, your child isn't talking very much. And so it's a really difficult conversation to have, but I think as teachers, it's a really important one that we take those very objective observations, share them with the parents, and then give them the next step. Please take your child, or please make an appointment with your pediatrician or with your early intervention office, and let's work on this together. Let me know what I can do to help. If they have questions for me or screening questionnaires, I'm happy to fill any of those out. So anyway, that's the toughest part about being a preschool teacher. When you're in the midst of it, you might think like, bickering and pushing and shoving is the toughest part, but it's not. It's sharing concerns with parents. That's the toughest part in my opinion. So I would love to hear if you guys have some suggestions. I'm hoping to write up an article and put on the blog so that we can use it as a reference, and maybe even a handout, for parents if you have or for teachers if you have a staff that you can hand out to them. So it is so hard to hear that your child's having a bad day. That's true. So you need to as a teacher, positive, right? Always with the happy grams, and save the concerns for when it's something really serious. I usually don't even share if your child's having like a little bit of a bad day, because let's be honest, we all have a little bit of a bad day. This is when you have a concern, an ongoing concern about a child's development, which is different than your child had not a great day. So anyway, have fun playing and learning with your kids. Leave some comments if you have other suggestions for me, and I'll try to include a lot of them in the article that I'm going to write. And I will see you again tomorrow. Jem and I are going to share some of our cow centers tomorrow. So have a great afternoon. Thanks for joining me. Bye, everybody.